Welcome back to FlatsClass University. Today's video, it's all about catching big speckled trout. And we're going to do it with some of the popular lures from Florida to Texas that have a reputation for making this happen. So get those notepads ready. We're going to put you on the path to success.
All right, we're just going to dive right in here this morning. February's here. And typically by the last big moon in February, the spawn in most places in Florida is beginning to take place. You'll notice that the water temperature starts to rise every day, and we get to that magic number that puts them all up skinny by midday every day. What does that mean? That means they're going to be smashing your favorite artificial lures, those big splashy plugs, those big soft baits. And they're not going to always be fish that are under 20 inches. I'm talking about fish that are 20 to 25 inches long and some even larger. Now, we label the big trout, the gator trout, as a trout that's at least 24 inches long. That's a 5-year-old fish. But in my opinion, once they're over 20 inches, they behave completely different. And the attitude about swatting at big plugs does not put them off. What is the signal that lets you know those fish are moving shallow? Well, the biggest signal is water temperature. When the water temperature here in my state or my zone reaches about 65 degrees consistently, moving to 70 degrees, I know those big gator trout are going to start following the bait up on the incoming tide and get real skinny. They're going to be willing to feed up there. It's not just for warmth, it's for food. And if you can time it around the big moons and play the salooner game really well, you're going to encounter some big time opportunities to get that gator. Now, some of the things I love about gator trout is their sight. They're just sight predators. They're snipers. They're the snipers of the grass. They sit down in that grass, head up, looking over the top of it, just idling around on the edge of a pothole or next to an oyster bar or a little rocky outcropping. And when they see a mullet come by or a wayward pinfish, they just make one quick sudden move, boom, and grab them. This is what's so exciting about catching them on artificial. It's that thump. I mean, that big, you feel it. It goes through the line, through the rod, and into your hand. And it's one of those strikes that you just can't get enough of. Now, I would say that overcast days or foggy days or days you got a little bit of a breeze are probably going to be the better days to target. And these fish do love cover because they feel a little vulnerable when they're up there in shallow water. So they're going to gravitate to the areas that have a little bit more grass, or there's some darker bottom where there's going to be some oyster bars or some rocky outcroppings or some edges so that they can get up tight against it. But don't underestimate them. They will be that fish that surprises you. They're very keen also on knowing if you are there. So you're going to have some maximum casting distance. That's why these heavier baits work so well, so that you can really send them and get them out there, because these fish usually do not respond to pressure very well. You'll just see them lift up and kind of like wake away and then settle back down. But it's over. They know you're there. All right, the part you're really waiting for. So what are the top lures that are going to draw or incite vicious strikes from these bigger gator trout? Well, for one, I would say top water. Big top waters work really well. Now, many of you are, I'm going to say, apprehensive about throwing a big top water in super shallow water. Well, if you've got that overcast day or that little bit of a breeze or that little bit of fog that we typically have in early spring, it won't matter. Just methodically work it slow. Boom. You're not working it like this, like you're trying to catch a snook in June. It's just tick, tock, tick, tock. Stop it for a second. Then go tick, tock. Then stop it. Tick, tick, tock, tock. Very erratic, very slow, like a cold, stunned mullet. Try it. It works. My next best trick, if you will, or favorite lure, I should say, would be the Paul Brown lure, the Corky. Now, I favor in the month of February, especially when the water temps could be a little bit cooler, I love throwing the pork chop. That's what I call the fat boy from Paul Brown. It is a fantastic, slow-moving bait that has a side-to-side action that you can control, and it has a very slow sink. Now, if you use the original fat boy, it will fall maybe a foot per second. So if you're a wade angler, or even if you're fishing from a boat, then one of the more important things about a Paul Brown lure is you must be stationary. You got to be in contact with that bait. So power pull down if you're in a skiff, or pin down if you're in a kayak. If you're wade fishing, you already know the game. But you're going to walk this thing slow. Now, there are certain Paul Brown fat boys that sink a little bit slower, and they're actually the floater version, but they don't float. They have a red gill that denotes that it's the floater, and all it does is sink at about half the rate the original Paul Brown fat boy sinks at. But let me tell you something, when that big 24-inch trout is sitting out there and it sees a bait that size, it's going to want to eat it. And it's just, I don't know what it is about that homemade bait that they love so much, but I guarantee you, if you master it, you will get a PB. When it's warmer, usually later in the afternoon, or I've got a clearing sky and the skies are a little brighter, then I'll make a switch. I'll push off and start fishing some soft plastics. One of the ones that was launched in the last year that I really like a lot is the Z-Man Big Ballers in the 5-inch size. It is an amazing lure, especially when you Texas rig it with a 4 or 5/0 rigging hook. Or maybe try it with a Pro Bullets, which is one of my favorite ways to rig that bait because it casts so far. But that action that tail has, even when it's at rest, because it's more segmented and that ball tail really throws back and forth, it gives it a really good action. And when the fish are a little bit warmer and you're getting those water temperatures that are getting closer to 75 at the end of the day than 70, well, the Big Ballers, yeah, it's got some game. Another bait that I feel is a can't miss for big trout, especially early in the spring, is the Mirrolure XL. Some of the Texas pros call it the Double D because they've altered the weight of the hooks so it sinks even slower or even floats in certain salinities. But the Mirrolure XL is the right size. It's a hard bait, so it's pufferfish proof. It's one of those baits that I feel is a home run almost every time. I've got a ton of confidence. I fish here in Florida a lot. It's always in my bag when I'm fishing this time of year. It doesn't have as much side-to-side movement as the Paul Brown, but what it does have, it has those little shakes in it, and it has that wobble. And usually these fish really punch this bait on the stop, on the pause. That's when they really hit it. If you want to play around with a bait that's guaranteed to catch you some nice fish, try the Mirrolure XL. Moving on to another hard bait that I really like a lot, had a lot of confidence in for years until all these other options came up, but it still works, is the Catch 2000. Now this bait is 20 odd years old, but it still catches them. I take this bait up the Steenhatchee all the time, and it really does wreck them. And gives you a great opportunity, honestly, if you're fishing it around harder bottom, you know, those little rocky outcroppings or some of those oyster bars, to come into contact with a couple of big redfish too, because they love eating finger mullet that size. And that is the perfect imitation or mimicker of a finger mullet. If you've ever worked a Catch 2000, it's basically like walking the dog underwater. It's a sub-walking bait that just goes back and forth. And you're going to notice that this is a pattern with a lot of the baits that I'm talking about, is they have a lot of movement this way, but not this way. And that is to keep them in the strike zone for a longer period of time. And that tantalizes giant gator trout. And to complement the Catch 2000, and you're in that Paul Brown bag of yours, if you don't have a Catch 2000, tie the original, the OG Corky on. I am telling you, the original Paul Brown lure works fantastic. It behaves a lot like a Catch 2000, honestly. It has that nice slow sink, has a rattle in it. Again, if you want to fish it a little bit deeper, well, then pick the one that doesn't have the red gill on it. And there are ways to make both the fat boy and the corky get a little deeper by bending and modifying the lure, knocking that nose down a little bit, bending that tail down a little bit, where it will dig a little bit more and get down. When I only want it to dig a little bit, I don't get as aggressive with that modification. But I will tell you, those baits, if you tweak them a little bit, they're pretty hard to beat. The next one is a bait that I don't want to say you don't have game, but if you just want to mindlessly cover water, you have no idea where they are. Absolutely no idea. And the water temps have come up. It actually works better for me once we get into March and April. But if I have clients that aren't manipulating the bait just right, I give them an unrigged Z-Man 4-inch Mullitron. If you put that lure Texas rigged or Pro Bullets weighted and let them throw it where it just is barely under the surface, I'm talking about weighting it with about 3/16, because that's a very high float bait. That wedge tail has just a little bit of action. It's not like a big floppy paddle tail. It's just got that little bit of wave. And if you reel that around oyster bars, see, the downside of having a perpetually moving bait is the fact that most of these trout don't chase stuff down. They're waiting for it to be easy. But you can cover a ton of water with a Mullitron, and you will connect with a big trout, I promise you. Plus, you might get surprised by an early spring snook, and definitely going to catch your share of redfish for sure. Here's a couple more. I'd say these are kind of tied with me, and it would be the Paul Brown Devil, which I really fish this like a jerk shad. I typically fish it in a little bit deeper depths, 2.5 to 4 foot, and I'm popping it so it's darting back and forth. I fish it a lot like a jerk shad, so it's better when my water temps are a little bit warmer. And then the Soft Dine XL from Paul Brown. I was not a fan of this bait when it first came out. I was like, why wouldn't I just throw my Mirrolure XL? Why would I throw a Soft Dine XL? Well, I've got to admit, the fish really hang on to it. And it doesn't have the exact same action that a Mirrolure XL has. In fact, it's a little quicker. So again, I like to wait till my water temps are just a little bit warmer. When they get a little bit warmer, well, that's when those two baits come out of the bag. All right, I'll give some honorable mentions to a couple of baits. Lipped plugs, like the hard bait version of the jerk bait. This is a bass tactic that works extremely well in the upper Gulf Coast. It works well in the Carolinas. You typically gotta have a little bit more depth. So you need like that 4 to 8 foot depths to make those really effective. I do use those from time to time in the river, but for the most part, that's not really something that I grab that often for the big trout for myself. But what is popular, especially where I live and fish, is the guide community and some of the local avid anglers. They love throwing oversized soft jerk baits, 5-inch, 6-inch, 7-inch jerk baits. And they just nose hook them either with a J hook or a circle hook, and they just cast them out and they twitch them slowly. So they almost have a walk the dog and a fall. Kind of a lazy, wounded, erratic, no pattern to it at all on the tempo, but they catch really big trout. It's hard to argue how effective that has been. So let's take a moment and talk about retrieves. In the early spring, February, March, and in colder winters, even up to April, the pace is going to be very slow, methodical, and add some erratic action to the bait to get the fish's attention, the predator's attention. Most of the baits that I have mentioned are designed to be fished slow. They are. That's my favorite time to fish is February, March, maybe early April, but by April, I'm already focused on snook and cobia where I live because I'm a Floridian. Many of you guys are in the height of trout fishing at that point, but that's neither here nor there. What you're looking for is that flick, 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 stop. And make that stop, a second or more. Then flick, flick, stop. Let it fall again. Then maybe the next time, flick, 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 stop. See where I'm going? Don't make it too rhythmic. The idea is to have some action, but not a lot of forward progress, like I said earlier. And the eat, the bite, the strike almost always happens on that stop and stall where it starts to go down. Because you get their attention, they rush up to it. You've seen this before. A trout looks at it, he doesn't know what he wants to do, but as soon as it stops and starts doing this, boom, he eats it. He feels like it's vulnerable. It's right there for the taking, and he hits it. That's what we call thump therapy, and it is addictive. A question I know I'm going to answer in the comments is going to be, so what rod and reel setup do I need to fish most of these baits? Well, I'm going to give you two. I'm going to give you a spinning version. I'm going to give you a casting rod version because I'm a bait caster guy. Spinning rods. I personally love 7-foot medium fast. That's what I like. The fast has got enough forgiveness, yet still very responsive in the tip to hang on to a fish with treble hooks. The medium really covers the gamut of most of these baits. Medium action rods usually set you up somewhere between 1/8, 3/16 and 1/4 at the low end, all the way up to 1/2, 5/8, and sometimes 3/4 on the high end, depends on the brand. Now, many of you own 7-foot 6-inch rods, and that is fine. You're going to be able to throw most of these baits a country mile on a spinning rod to start with because you're going to be using 10-pound braid, and most of your spinning reel sizes are going to be in the 2,500 to 3,000 size. So that sets up for some long casts. Now, if blind casting is something that you're doing on a flat, then maybe a 7.5-foot rod would be better for you. But you're going to cover a lot of water, and those longer rods do get a little fatiguing after a period of time. So I always opt for 7-footers. I think a 7-foot rod is perfect. And I think it gives me a lot of accuracy. In fact, I've got a lot of 7s to 7'3" rods in my spinning rod arsenal that when I'm fishing any of these suspenders, that's what I'm throwing most of the time. Now, casting gear, oh, this is my wheelhouse here. You can have anything from a 6.5-foot rod all the way up to like 7'2", 7'3", with 7-foot probably, again, being the sweet spot. I opt most of the time for a medium fast rod. There are a lot of anglers in Texas that would tell you they would rather have a medium light fast or maybe a medium mod fast. But I'm a big medium fast guy. I have a lot of confidence in that length, power, and action. And I usually am fishing reels that are in the 100 size to the 150 size. Braid weight for me is generally 20 pound for that, or maybe I'll throw the Diamond Micro 30 pound, which behaves like 20 pound. Leaders for both, really leaders can be anywhere between 15 pounds and 25 pounds. That's your window for fluorocarbon leader with these baits. If you're topwater fishing, naturally your leaders are going to be much shorter. But if you're suspending bait fishing, you know, if you're in clear water, you might have to have a 4 or 5 or 6 foot leader. But in most stained or off conditions, you know, fog, overcast, breeze, you can get by with a 3.5, 4 foot leader, and sometimes even less if you're in turbid water. If you enjoyed this kind of intel, really learned something today, feel like I've armed you with the right information to take to the water and get your PB trout this spring, well, give us that thumbs up, smash the subscription button, and don't forget to join me at FlatsClassUniversity.com, where I teach my students everything they need to know to be the best angler they can be.